Today we're going to be talking about fat loss. As you all know, my name is Allison Molinares. I am the Registered Dietitian at the MaxWell Clinic, and I'm very, very excited about today's topic. So how and why does the body store fat? I know we're talking about fat loss, and you probably kind of know this, but I just want to give you a big overview on this. So let's get started on why and how does it do it. So first, I want to start with like a steam engine analogy. I've heard this, a few years ago, I believe, and it kind of stuck with me, and I think it's helpful to think about it this way. So a steam engine is going to need, coal to run. So you have to put in some coal for it to then burn and produce some of that energy. And humans are about the same, give or take. We need food. Food is what we burn to then produce energy. So the more we add in, the more we should be burning and utilizing. However, sometimes we add in maybe too much of that coal into a steam engine and it doesn't burn all the way. Let's say it gets turned off, it doesn't get used. And so some of that coal is just going to remain there. And that is what happens with our food as well. So we eat the food, and if we don't use it for energy, we don't burn it, then we just store it. That's how we store fat, essentially. In a very broad, generalized term, that is how it happens. So if you keep consuming new food, the food that does not get used just gets stored as fat, and then more new food keeps coming in, and the process just keeps on going. So I always like this analogy because it's very broad, but that is how it works, essentially. So why does the body store fat to begin with? Why does the body have this mechanism to store fat? And the primary reason that our body stores fat is because it then can be broken down for energy. So food, we use it for energy. Yes, there's, amino acids and muscle building and all these things, but in general, we burn food for energy. If you notice, you eat your proteins, your carbs, your fats, and then they get broken down even smaller into amino acids and glucose and then to fatty acids. But you see all those yellow arrows, and they all can end up as energy synthesis, production of energy, more energy for you to be able to do the things that you need. So let's say that you eat perhaps a little too much protein. Yes, you're going to be using those amino acids to build protein, but that excess amino acid can then be utilized for energy as well. And now if energy does not get utilized, if you notice where the glucose has a little yellow arrow, it can be stored in the liver and muscles as glycogen, but it can also be stored as fatty acids and lipid synthesis. Now, we do this so that we can later then break it down to use for energy if needed. Okay. All right. Now, something I will say is that we do store glycogen in the liver and muscles. However, the muscles don't necessarily take up a ton of that glycogen. We don't necessarily see a ton of glycogen in the muscles, enough for maybe 14 to 24 hours, but it does not store more than that. However, there can be more fat storage in the liver, and I'm sure you've heard of fatty liver before, and that comes from having too much storage in the liver as well. Okay. All right. Now, how does the fat get accumulated? How does your body actually store the fat? So, like I said, excess glucose is stored in the liver and muscles as glycogen, but then it also in the primary storage happens by being produced into triglycerides and then goes to the adipose tissue. That's the actual fat that you see in the body. So that excess glucose does go through some cycling, gets to triglycerides, and then your adipose tissue. So where there is an abundance of fat in the liver, like I said, that's when we can see the non-alcoholic fatty liver. So that doesn't have anything to do with the excess alcohol, but more so just excess fat that gets stored there. So that is how we do it. Now, I did want to bring this up because I don't feel like a lot of people know about this, and it is somewhat new, and it kind of speaks to the types of adipose tissue. So adipose tissue is kind of your fat tissue, as you can see in that picture. So to date, there are several types of adipose tissue. There is a white tissue that can be broken down in subcutaneous or visceral. You might have heard of this. So the white tissue, like I said, broken down in both of those. So subcutaneous, it's kind of below, under your skin, like right below it, where visceral is kind of integrated and intra-abdominally near your organs. Now, I am sure you have heard that that fat adjacent to your organs is not a good thing. That visceral fat can contribute to metabolic syndrome. It can contribute to systemic inflammation. It can contribute to dyslipidemia, atherosclerosis, predisposition to prediabetes, as well as, like I said, non-alcoholic fatty liver. So I'm sure you've heard of subcutaneous fat, and that just means that it's right below the skin, where visceral is kind of close and tucked into those organs, which we don't like. Now, there is other types of adipose tissue, actually, not just the white, but there is also brown. And brown is given that name, and because of the color, it kind of gets a brownish tone because there's a lot of mitochondria in it. And that gives it the brownish color. So the brown was thought to just be happening in animals who hibernate, like bears. However, we have found that it makes up 1 to 2% of the total fat stores of humans. Brown fat is great because it helps generate heat. So ideally, in a perfect world, we would all have more of that brown fat because it's actually being utilized for that heat. And that's where the beige comes in. So the beige fat is kind of white fat that has some of that browning happening to it. Now, there's still some research that has to be done on how can we make more of that white fat into the brown and beige. However, the only few things that they have right now are colder temperatures as well as exercise. I just wanted to give you kind of an idea of that tissue, because previously we thought of, the adipose tissue or your fat tissue as not having a function except just storing fat. It was originally classified as a storage organ. That was it. However, we now know that it functions as a major endocrine system. It secretes adipokines, growth factors, cytokines, and chemokines. So it actually has a big role. It is an endocrine system now. So it has adipokines like the leptins and adiponectins. So fat is not just there sitting there, which is what we used to believe. Fat actually has a purpose. And that's why that visceral fat can be contributing to some of those things that we talked about, like systemic inflammation. So that fat is doing something. It's not just there being stored. That's why I wanted to bring up the types of fat that we have. Okay. Now, how do I burn the excess fat already stored? That's what I think most of you guys are kind of here for. Like, well, what do we do? So we know that to avoid weight gain, based on that coal analogy, we need to burn the calories that we eat. Perfect. So we eat the calories, we burn the calories, but there is some stored calories already there. There's some stored fat already there. So how do I burn that excess fat already stored? So that's what we're going to talk about today. Before we jump into that, I kind of wanted to talk about, well, what does the body do with the food that we eat? How does the body actually burn those calories? So there is 3 main things that the body uses. Thermogenesis, you might have heard of this term, and that's why I wanted to add it in case you've heard of it. And that's just the thermic effect of food. So that's the calories, the energy utilized for digestion and absorption and just breaking down of all that food. Your body does use some energy for that. Now, your body also uses energy on physical activity. So we know when we exercise, we go on walks and hikes and swimming, you are going to be using some of that energy. Now, NEAT is, I don't know if you've heard of it, it's not necessarily fairly new, but it is kind of the non-exercise activity thermogenesis, meaning your daily things. Maybe that is your tapping of your finger or walking to, go grab some water, or maybe it's just very light, grabbing the kids from here and there. So it's just kind of what you do and the calories that you burn with movements in your daily routine. So it's non-sport like exercise. So staying active throughout the day does matter because that's the NEAT that is utilized. That's the non-exercise thermogenesis that happens. And the last thing that your body uses your calories and burns energy on is your basic body function. So if you've heard of basal metabolic rate, this is where it comes from. So your body is doing things without you noticing. Your heart is beating, your kidneys are filtering, your lungs are breathing. That all takes energy for your body to do. And it does it on a daily basis. And it is utilizing calories for that. So those are the 3 things that we know that your body burns energy and uses up those calories on. So how do I achieve fat loss? This is the big one. We know we can't increase your digestion, meaning breaking down of food and absorption, without adding extra calories. If you increase digestion, that means you're eating more, which means you're putting in more calories. So we can't really increase how many calories you burn through digestion and absorption. Now, we also can't really increase your basal metabolic rate necessarily because you can't really control how fast your kidney filtrates things or how quickly your heart beats. To a certain extent, I know when you exercise, that does happen. And that leaves us to increasing exercise and increasing NEAT. That you can do. You do have control over that. So if you want to achieve fat loss, increasing exercise and increasing NEAT or just your daily movement really matters. You are in control of that. Now, the last thing is creating a calorie deficit. And we are going to be diving into what is that? I've heard about it, but how exactly do I do that? And how can I do that consistently to achieve the fat loss that we're looking for? So increase in exercise, I think for most of us is an obvious one, just getting, more workouts throughout the week if possible. I did want to talk about how to increase NEAT today. That's something that you can start doing right now. If you're at work, if you're taking a lunch break, whatever that may be, a standing desk. I am sure you've heard some of your clinicians or your doctors or maybe friends talk about a standing desk. A lot of us are working from home, or even if you're in the office, a standing desk is great because I don't know about you, but I personally don't just sit on or stand on my desk stiff. You are moving. You're fidgeting from one leg to the other the whole time. And that is NEAT. That's it. That's non-exercise movement, but all day you're moving. Whereas if you're in a chair, you're just sitting in a chair. You're not burning those any calories. So that's something to consider. I've also seen people get those big exercise balls and sit on them. And again, the big thing is you're moving the whole time. You're moving the whole time. You're not just sitting there stiff and you're trying to balance, which is making your body work a little bit harder. So that's a great way to increase your NEAT today. Now, some things is if you are pacing back and forth at your kids' games or at home while you're doing things with the kids, just pace back and forth instead of standing still. That does increase your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. You are burning a few little bit here or there, but you are fidgeting all day long. That's going to add up at the end of the day. Carrying your groceries instead of pushing a cart. Now, this is if it's doable. I don't need you, killing yourself to get to your car, but when you're lifting something and you're walking, that is something that adds to the non-exercise activity. Walking briskly when going anywhere. So yes, sure, you're walking and let's say you park further in the parking lot. That's a great way to do it, but try to speed up a little bit more, not just slow, on your phone type walk, but a little bit quicker. Taking the long way to the water cooler at the office, just go the full way around, do a full lap while you do it. And one of my favorites is pacing when you're on the phone with someone. If you're calling your best friend, your mom, grandparents, whoever it is, and you're on the phone instead of sitting on the couch, if you're pacing back and forth in your kitchen, that is adding to your daily movement. And that is a great way to do it. And I would recommend, fat loss or not, that we do increase activity because most of us are sitting a lot more nowadays. So this is helpful for anybody just to keep in mind, and especially if you're wanting to create some fat loss, if you're wanting to burn a few extra calories, this can be helpful and it does add up at the end of the day, not just the workouts, but this as well. Now, let's talk about a calorie deficit because I know that you may have heard of it, but it can be complicated to try to understand or to do. So a calorie deficit is when you eat less calories than your body needs per day, so then it is forced to use the stored fat for energy. So take Sally here. She naturally burns 2,000 calories a day, and that includes her basal metabolic rate and her activity, which is 2 workouts a week. Those are her maintenance calories. So those are the calories that Sally needs to eat to remain exactly the same weight that she is right now. So Sally doesn't want to stay the same. Sally would like to create a calorie deficit to see some fat loss. So Sally's going to then decide to add in 2 more days of exercise. So that's 200 calories per week. So say each workout is 100 calories. She's burning 200 more calories a week. That would be about 30 calories per day if you divide it by the 7 days. Now with food, Sally is then going to create a calorie deficit by, instead of eating 2,000 calories, she's going to decrease them by 400 and only eat about 1,600 calories every day. So if every day she eats 1,600 calories, each day she's creating a 400 calorie deficit plus her 30 of her workouts. So at the end of the day, with her 2 added workouts and her calorie deficit through food, she is creating a 430 calories per day deficit. Does that make sense? So how do we do this? How does Sally go from eating 2,000 calories to 1,600 calories without being super hungry, without, having issues? How does she do this? Well, this is how you create a calorie deficit. Okay, so intermittent fasting, I'm sure a few of you have heard this. Now, I'm not going to get into the health benefits of a few of these things, but they do have health benefits, not just fat loss, including intermittent fasting. So with intermittent fasting, you are creating a period of time where you are not eating. So let's say the most common one is, eating maybe between 12 and 8. That's a 16-hour fast, and you are skipping breakfast. So Sally is no longer eating those calories she normally ate at breakfast. They're completely gone. That way, she created a calorie deficit. Let's say her breakfast is 300 calories, maybe even more. She's saving herself those calories. You've probably heard of tracking calories and macros, which can be tedious, but it can be really helpful as well. So that could be putting it all in an app, which is easier instead of writing it down, but you could do it that way. And just seeing, okay, well, in a day, am I eating 1,600 calories or less? At the end of the day, you look, okay, yes, I am. With macros, it's about the same. If you know you have to eat X amount of grams of protein, you know about how many calories that is at the end of the day. So calories and macros can be very close together. Like I said, other benefits to that, but for fat loss, tracking macros and calories could be a good option. Not for everybody, and that's important. There is not one way for everybody. Some things work for some people, some things don't work for some people. Some people can't do intermittent fasting. Some people can't or prefer not to track calories. So don't feel like you have to do all of these, but maybe you can pick one or two or just one and it could work. The other thing, an obvious one, but reducing portion size at each meal. Perhaps our portions are a little bit bigger. Maybe we're eating too much of that rice or that quinoa. Perhaps we're going over with the amount of nuts that we put on our salad. Things like that. Reducing those portions, being aware of them, that can help us overall reduce our calorie, create a calorie deficit. Just for maintenance calories, reduce it a little bit. That creates that calorie deficit. Eating healthier food. This is for those of us who perhaps don't eat as healthy as we'd want. And if we change it to a little bit healthier, we can reduce those calories just because some of the healthier food is naturally more lower calorie. That's your vegetables, for example. Reducing the calories in each snack and the amount of snacks per day. I know a lot of people who like to graze throughout the day and they're eating maybe 2, 3, 4 snacks without realizing it or noticing it, but not really eating meals and more so just eating snacks and not paying attention so that it adds up. So if you reduce the calories in each snack, or maybe just don't eat 4 snacks, maybe you eat 2, that's going to create a calorie deficit as well. Avoid or at least reduce alcohol. So alcohol is a big one because it really adds up quickly when you have 2, 3, 4 drinks a week. And it may just be 2 on Friday, 2 on Saturday, but you just added extra calories to your day and there is no nutrition in there either. So those are empty calories you just added for fat storage. So reducing or, for a period of time, perhaps avoiding alcohol can really be helpful at helping you reduce your calorie deficit. Now, meals out. That is a big one. 92% of meals from large chain restaurants, from just restaurants in general, not just fast food, have way over the amount of calories that are needed per meal. So most of them have about 1,000 to 1,200 calories, just one meal, which is way more than anyone needs per meal. The average meal calorie per person is about 570. So it's double what most people need. And that is at restaurants. We think of fast food only, but restaurants pack on the calories. They love to add extra butter to your steaks and to your vegetables. So being aware, how often are you going out to eat? What are you choosing when you go out to eat is important and can help you create a calorie deficit. If you're going out to eat 5 times a week and you bring it down to 2, that is a big deficit that you're creating just by removing or, decreasing the amount of times that you go out to eat. So those are just a few of the strategies. And like I said, they don't all have to be for you. Perhaps you fall in one category where you're thinking, my portions need to be better, but I don't really go out to eat. That's okay. It's what works best for you. Not everything works for everybody. And there are different strategies to get you to create a calorie deficit. At the end of the day, as long as we're creating a calorie deficit, we will be making progress in terms of fat loss. So I do want to show you an example of creating a calorie deficit just with intermittent fasting. Mind you, some of you might already eat healthier than this, but I just want to give a generalized example. For example, in fall time, we have pumpkin spice lattes. They're delicious. They're great. And that with, let's say you get to work and they have bagels with cream cheese and you're like, oh, sure, I'll have one. That's a normal, let's say a normal breakfast for you. You just happen to have that one day, but you did pack a lunch and you brought a sandwich with some chips. Okay. Then you also brought a pretty good snack. You brought some, mixed nuts and had about half a cup of them. You got home and you made some chicken enchiladas, had some rice and beans. So that is Sally's end of day count of calories. So we said she needs a 1,600 calorie deficit. She needs to eat 1,600 calories or less to create her calorie deficit to lose fat, right? But if that's Sally's normal day, that's why she maybe got in trouble with gaining some weight. Her maintenance calories were 2,000. She's eating almost 2,400. So perhaps this is how Sally got in trouble. So let's say Sally starts doing some intermittent fasting. We keep let's say the lunch and the snack and the dinner just about the same, but by removing the breakfast and just having maybe some herbal tea, waiting to eat at lunch, she is creating that 1,600 calorie or less deficit. Now, I understand this is perhaps not the best idea because Sally might just be a little hungry considering what her meals look like, but I just wanted to break it down and give you an example of how this works. Would I perhaps like Sally to change her dinner and lunch up a little bit? Absolutely. But just wanted to give you an example of how the calories would end up and how creating, a calorie deficit with intermittent fasting would work. Okay. Now, I want to give you an example of eating healthier to create a calorie deficit, which is my preferred choice because I not only am worried about her fat loss, I'm more worried about her health than her fat loss to begin with. So I want her to instead try to eat a little healthier for many other reasons. So instead of her, 2,300 calorie day, she could be in a calorie deficit and still eat, 3 meals and a snack. So if she were to have a homemade coffee without all the added sugars from that pumpkin spice latte, she could have the coffee with some avocado toast with some boiled eggs on top. That breakfast right there is significantly different in sugar, and she at least has some protein. And so it's a lot healthier, and she decreased her calories at breakfast. Then for lunch, instead of just doing a sandwich, we added some veggies, and she still got a cup of rice. And she still, yes, it's a higher calorie lunch, but it's way more filling, more nutritious. So then the rest of the day doesn't have to be as high calorie. For example, the enchiladas, she doesn't have to eat as big of a meal because she had a good lunch and she still gets a snack. Now her snack, while nuts are healthy, don't get me wrong, her snack was really high calorie for what she needed. So by just doing a cup of some veggies with 2 tablespoons of hummus, she decreased her snack calories by quite a bit. And then she was able to cook at home and make herself something a little bit lighter, 2 cups of broccoli because we need those veggies, 5 ounces of salmon. We do need that protein. Protein is key. And you'll hear me say that again. And she was able to create her calorie deficit just by eating slightly healthier because things like vegetables don't have as high calories as other foods. So this is how you create a calorie deficit by just eating healthier. Again, you may already be eating healthy. Maybe we do need to explore other options for you. But I just want to give you an example of what that would look like. Okay. Now, examples of meals out and alcohol preventing your calorie deficit. This one happens quite often, and I see it especially on weekends where we eat really well Monday through Friday, but then Saturday, Sunday, or let's say Friday, Saturday come around and you want to go out to eat with friends, with, your significant other. So let's say this is, Sally's Monday through Friday, she's eating better and she's creating a calorie deficit. She's having, 2 meals and a really good, nutritious, high protein snack. So she's, essentially having 3 meals a day and she's creating that calorie deficit. Now, let's say it's Friday night and Sally is going on a date and she decides to have an appetizer because oftentimes you get an appetizer before dinner and she has a couple of drinks. And she gets, 6 ounces of steak with some mashed potatoes and whatever little vegetables they usually tend to give you at a restaurant. That meal, like I said, very high calorie. And I'm going on the lower end because I'm not sure what appetizers she got. But if that was wings or nachos or something high calorie, that meal probably would be upwards of 1,200 to 1,300 calories. A glass of wine on average has about 150 calories. And so she had 2. That's an extra 300 calories. So on Friday and on Saturday, Sally is going over her calories by like 600. So all that work she did during the week, because of the weekend, she didn't create as big of a calorie deficit as she needed to see a half a pound or a pound loss during the week. So could you be eating healthy during the week and perhaps on weekends throwing it off a little bit? You can. Now, that's not to say that when you are doing fat loss, you can't enjoy a meal out. You can, but maybe reconsidering that appetizer and maybe just doing a salad, or perhaps not 2 glasses of wine, just 1 glass of wine. Maybe it's looking at other options on the menu that are not as high calorie. So that's not to say you can't go out to eat or that you can't necessarily drink at all, but you got to be aware, maybe she does it one day of the week, she'd be okay. But if she did it Friday and Saturday, she's going over her calories by quite a bit. So this is how we can eat healthy Monday through Friday, and then on the weekend, throw it off. That doesn't include dessert, which I know happens sometimes also. Okay. Now, I do want to touch on things that are affecting your ability to achieve fat loss that are not related to food. And oftentimes, I think we are not aware of these things. Oftentimes, we're aware, but we just don't realize how big of an impact they really, truly make. Sleep is a really big one. I oftentimes hear tired parents, overworked adults who are not sleeping enough, but they want to achieve fat loss and don't realize how much a lack of sleep is really affecting them. For one, digestion can raise your body temperature. So if you eat close to bedtime, your body temperature is being raised, which can disrupt your sleep quality. If you have heard you shouldn't eat that close to bedtime, there's many reasons why. One of those is that it affects your sleep. Yes, it increases blood sugars and a few other things, but just starting out there, eating close to bedtime raises that body temperature. Now, your sleep quality affects your food intake as well. I always say if you had a sleepless night, you are more likely to feel hungry the next day. Why? Because it messes up with your hormones. Ghrelin, which is a hunger hormone, is increased when you don't sleep. And leptin, which is a fullness hormone or a satiety hormone, is decreased, meaning your hunger hormone increases a lot more when you don't sleep. So is it weird for you to feel hungry the next day? No, it's what your body is doing. It's what it needs to do. That's what it naturally does. So we need to really work on our sleep so that we don't struggle near as much. So it is disturbing your hormones. Your hunger and fullness hormones are disturbed when you don't sleep properly. Sleep deprivation can affect your appetite profile. It does. And so being aware of that is important. Don't just ignore it. Oh, I just sleep 5 hours. I only slept 6 hours. I'm tired all the time. It doesn't matter. Yes, it does, because it's going to make you more hungry the next day. And you are just wondering, why am I so hungry all the time? Sleep could be an answer to that. Now, hormones. There's a lot of hormones out there that are affecting your fat loss, preventing you from being able to do fat loss. If you have ever struggled with hypothyroidism, you probably know this. Your thyroid controls your weight quite a bit. And so getting that normalized is very important. Insulin resistance can make it more difficult for you to see fat loss. Now, when you go through premenopause and menopause, when there is estrogen is decreasing, you're also going to be struggling with fat loss. So getting your hormones checked is very important. It's not something we want to ignore because that excess estrogen is not going to go away on its own if we're not doing anything about it. And it is going to make it harder for you to see fat loss. So that's something that you may be saying, yeah, my hormones are crazy, but whatever. It does affect your fat loss. So if that is your goal, hormones are something that we do need to look at. Now, inflammation can mess with your leptin as well. So again, that's a hormone that tells your body we're full, we're good to go. And it can make it so that you are low on that leptin. And again, that hunger hormone will increase. And that is inflammation from all over. We know that we discuss with all of our patients inflammation all the time. It's a cornerstone of a ton of diseases, and it does affect your weight loss as well. When your body is inflamed, it is not likely that it wants to release fat, and it is going to be making you more hungry. So if you're hungry all the time, is inflammation part of the problem and you're not aware of it? Now, stress, toxic relationships, and underlying trauma, that's something that I don't ever hear anybody talk about, but that stress level, and if you see here on this chart, how stress can affect your body is so big. And that underlying trauma, even if it's maybe not at the forefront of your everyday, it is there and it is affecting how your body functions. Those toxic relationships add stress to your daily lives. So cortisol pumping through your veins, it's gonna stimulate that glucose, which, gives that instant energy to run from whatever stressor. Your body doesn't know if you're being chased by a bear or if you're at your office just stressed out. It does not know that, but it is going to give your body some extra glucose, right? But then you're not moving. You're at your desk. You're really stressed out at your desk, sitting there. So there is no burning of said glucose that was just released. And when there is high glucose, your body releases insulin, because insulin is what allows your cells to open up and let glucose or sugar into the cell and be utilized for energy. And insulin is signaling to their body, fat storage, store. So stress, underlying trauma, and toxic relationships, while we tend to not discuss them, they are affecting you significantly. If you are someone who is stressed out all the time, who is anxious all the time, please do know that does affect your fat loss significantly. And so we really got to work at the root of things. We can't just say, I can't lose fat. Is, well, why can't you? And if we know there is some underlying trauma to work through, we have to do the hard thing and work through that. There's a toxic relationship. It's time to think about, well, how much is it really affecting me? How toxic is it? And let's work through that. And then stress. We are in a society that just thinks stress is okay. We're just stressed all the time. You hear everyone, oh my God, so stressed, so busy. Yes, sure, we are, but we need to work towards stress reduction. We have to be intentional about this. Your stress also disturbs your sleep, which then if your sleep is disturbed, we already know that you're going to be hungry the next day. So these are things that, have nothing to do with your food, technically, but they might make you more hungry, and they might make you, store more energy, might make you release more insulin. So these are things that I want you guys to keep in mind and kind of do a self-check of, are these things affecting me on a daily basis, on a regular basis? And could this be why my fat loss is not happening? That's not to say that they can be worked on and fixed and we can get to fat loss, but we got to be very honest about what is truly going on. Okay. Now, these are things that I want you to remember when you're trying to lose fat, that oftentimes I have to remind my patients over and over. One, you're not supposed to be starving all the time. I have heard this, and I think it comes from years and years back, that if you're hungry, it's working. No, we do not want to be hungry, because to lose fat, and let's say you want to lose 10, 20, 30 pounds, you have to be in a calorie deficit for a long period of time. This is not going to happen in a week. This is not going to happen in a month. It's going to take time. You're not going to be hungry and starving for 3 months. It just will not happen. At some point, you will crack. You will break and you will just eat because you're starving. Your body is seeing food and it's not able to eat it. And that is going to drive you nuts. So you're not supposed to be hungry all the time. There are ways that you can create a calorie deficit while still eating 3 meals and a snack. So we just need to maybe change what we're eating, but we're not supposed to be hungry. Please, if you are starving all the time trying to lose fat, please come talk to me, because I would love to help. That is not what we're supposed to be doing, okay? Now, protein and vegetables are key to fat loss. And oftentimes I always hear, well, I don't really like vegetables, so I just try to just eat a bunch of protein and that's it. Or I'm trying to eat healthy, but it's just protein and carbs. If your plate is not full of vegetables, you need something to fill you up. So then you're going to go ahead and overeat on those carbs or overeat on that protein. So increasing your vegetable intake is huge. Why? Because vegetables are really low calorie and they have fiber and they fill you up. Protein keeps you full. And a big thing I always tell patients is, as you're losing fat, you can lose muscle too. And we don't want to lose muscle. So if you keep your protein intake up, we are preventing or trying as hard as we can to prevent muscle breakdown and muscle loss. So protein and vegetables are key for this. So please remember that. Now, this is a big one, counterintuitive, and patients struggle with this one. Too low of a calorie deficit or under eating can actually slow down your metabolism over time. So let's say Sally here is like, well, I'm trying to lose weight fast. And instead of eating 1,600 calories, Sally goes down to 1,200 calories. And Sally stays at 1,200 calories for months. Yeah, sure, the first 2-3 months, she's going to lose fat. But then when she gets to month 4, 5, 6, 7, Sally's noticing, oh man, I'm not losing any more fat. Why am I not losing fat? Because her metabolism realized, oh man, we're not getting enough calories for the day. We're just not. So we got to slow down. We got to stop doing so much. And so your metabolism slowly slows down. This has been called starvation mode, which I don't like that term whatsoever. I don't think it's realistic because starvation can't happen. We've seen it in the past. More of adaptive. Your metabolism adapts to the situation. And so it is going to slow down so that it can do what it needs to do with the 1,200 calories Sally is deciding to give it. Over time, her metabolism is just there and she's not going to lose any more weight, and she can keep going down on calories because she'll be hungry all the time. So be mindful with your calorie deficit. We cannot go too low. We cannot survive on too low of calories. Your body will have to adapt to it and you'll be stuck after a few months. Okay. Now, it took time to put on. It's going to take time to take off. Okay. It takes time for fat loss. And I always hear, well, I have this event, or I have this to do, or I have this. Well, it took a while for you to gain the 10, 20, 30, 40 pounds. It's going to take some time to get off, and don't get frustrated so quickly. If you're solely focused on the fat loss, you're going to be struggling. Instead, focus on the non-scale wins, on, you know what, I am eating healthier. You know what, my energy feels better. I'm sleeping better. I have worked through my trauma. Those are things I want you to remember, to consider as wins, and just be patient. Okay. Now, it's more important to get you healthy first, and fat loss will follow. Like I said, hormones need to be worked on, maybe under controlled. Maybe you need some thyroid medication, whatever it may be, medication or not. It could just be working on your stress level. We want to get you healthy first, and fat loss will follow, because if we reduce your inflammation, your body is more likely to increase that leptin, so you're not as hungry all the time. So I will always tell my patients, I need to get you eating healthy, feeling better, just healthy overall, and the fat loss will follow. We don't want to get so zoned in on fat loss that we get frustrated when we just don't see fat loss happening, but our energy is better. Okay. So reframing the way you think about this is important. So those are just some things I always like to remind patients, that I oftentimes have to say over and over, and it's okay. It's my job to say them. But if you're here listening, please keep this in mind. Okay. How can you start today? I am here to give you all right, I'm ready for this. You talked about it. I've been trying, or haven't really been trying, but I kind of want to try. How do I start? Find your why. Man, I cannot tell you how important this is. This is a deep down reason. It is just ingrained in your soul of why you really want to do this. I hear, well, I just want to look better. That's not going to get you out of bed to go do a workout. It's really not. We need something deep down. Over my years, I've heard, you know what, I would love to be able to take my grandchildren to Disney World one day. That is a dream of mine. Man, that will get you out of bed thinking I need to walk now so that I get to walk with them later. That is a deep down reason. Or my mental health is not in the best place. I really want to work on my mental health and feel better. Yeah, when you're struggling and you really want to eat a bunch of cake, it's a mentality of, you know what, my mental health is suffering. I really don't want to add all those sugars to my body. That can give you that motivation, and not just motivation, but that dedication to do this, that discipline to do this. So you have to sit down and think of, why am I truly doing this? It's not just to look better. That's a plus, but what's the true deep down reason? Maybe you're just, man, I want to see my grandchildren, and I want to walk my daughter down the aisle, whatever that may be. I really want you guys to think of why you're doing this, that deep down reason that's just going to push you and get you disciplined throughout the entire period of time. Because like I said, this is going to take time. You need something deep down rooted in you that's going to push you to do this, to motivate you to do this. Figuring out your barriers. Now, this is a big one. It could be a non-supporting spouse in the household. It could be you can't exercise. Physically, you had an injury and you're not able to exercise. Perhaps it's a lack of knowledge. You don't really know how to do it. You've been trying this diet and that diet and nothing's working. Maybe that's a barrier for you. So keep that in mind. Your hormones. Maybe it's inflammation. Maybe it is that trauma. Maybe it is that stress. You have to identify what is preventing you from fat loss. So like I said, sit down, think about it, and go, okay, what's really going on in my life, and what's preventing me from fat loss? Honesty is key here, because saying I'm trying, but you're not really trying, is not going to get you anywhere. So being very, very honest with yourself, and then finding help. That's where MaxWell Clinic and I come in. I do this for a living. I love working with patients and helping them achieve their goals, but in a healthful, sustainable way. I am not going to drop your calories to a point where your metabolism is going to slow down. And if you are at that point where your metabolism has slowed down, we may need to go backwards. That's for a later time, but we may need to do some other things to get your metabolism going and then create that calorie deficit. So finding help is important. If you've been trying to do this for a while, make sure that you find help. We are here to help. If you're a MaxWell patient, and even if you're not, come see us. We'd love to work with you. All clinicians are trying to get you healthy, and then I am there to help you, support you through your nutrition. And then lastly, get started. I often hear, I'm going to do this. I'm going to start it this time, or after the holidays, or after summer, because, all the barbecues and travel. Just get started. It may be, we call it low hanging fruit, little things that you're like, I can change that. I know I can change that. I know I can do intermittent fasting. I know I can, just eat healthier. I know I can stop drinking, 3 times a week to maybe once a week. Get started. Even small changes make a really, really big difference. and you don't want to wait till you can fully dive in. I know there's an all or nothing oftentimes. And that's a mentality that we have to work on. And I understand sometimes we feel like it's either I'm all in or I'm just eating whatever I want and it's not healthy. But start with baby steps of, okay, what can I change today? Maybe it is just increasing your NEAT and your non-exercise activity. Maybe it is, I'm going to up my workouts a little bit. Whatever that may be, just get started today. I love this quote. I've heard it, and it can be a little harsh, but I think it's helpful. Losing weight is hard. Maintaining weight is hard. Staying overweight is hard. Choose your hard. At the end of the day, you make the choice of what you really want. If you really want this, it's going to be hard. It's going to take time, but maybe that's the hard you choose to get to the results you want versus staying overweight and unhappy. So, any questions from anybody? This is a time, if you've been on the Q&A or if you just thought of something, please do let me know. Let's see. I have a question. How much time should you have between a meal, snack, and bedtime? I want us to get us used to listening to our body, because your body is smart and it knows when it needs that energy. It knows when it's hungry and needs food. However, sometimes when we're starting out, our body's not talking to us as loudly as we want it to. And so I usually say for meals, it could be anywhere between 3 to 4 hours. For before bedtime, I would say ideally 3 hours before bed is when we want to stop eating. 2 is cutting it a little close because, again, you're still digesting that food. But I would say if you're going to bed at 10, try to be done eating by 7. That would be ideal. You're digesting. And again, as you lay down after you eat food, that acid could also come up and cause some reflux. So 3 hours is kind of a good time for that. In terms of resources related to counting macros, there's a few apps that I do recommend and have. A good one to just like start out in. And like I said, this is not for everyone. So please don't jump on this if you have a history of jumping on this to in the far end. Let's say if counting macros makes you more anxious, makes you hyper focus on food, macros and counting calories may not be for you. But if you are someone who like, I've never tried it and I could do it, I think it wouldn't necessarily get me in a bad place. One that is free and that I usually start out with and test patients with is MyFitnessPal. It's free and I like that it shows you the amount of fiber that you eat, because I want you to get plenty of fiber, and it does give you the amount of fiber as well as the protein, the fats, and the carbohydrates. So that's one that I can suggest. There's a few other ones. So if you're one of my patients, please send me a portal message if you have questions on that, or let's discuss it at our next visit. I have one on, you didn't mention fruit. That's a great question. So with fruit, I usually say 1 to 3 servings a day. So a serving would be an apple, or let's say a banana, or a kiwi, or I don't know, 3/4 to a cup of blueberries. That's about a serving. So 1 to 3 per day. And usually with fruit, I usually say, I recommend it, save it for your snack time if you can. For example, if you're making a smoothie, adding some berries to a smoothie is great. And that way it's not just a protein shake, you can make it into a smoothie. Oftentimes I see it at breakfast, like if you have oatmeal and you can throw some fruit in there, that's a good option. But it could be added to your salad. It could be added to here or there. Fruits are, yes, sugars, but they are natural sugars. And they also do have, tons of nutrients, antioxidants when it comes to berries. And they're not necessarily high calorie. So we can still eat fruit and create a calorie deficit. At the end of the day, we are looking at the overall calories. And if adding a handful of fruit is going to add that sweetness so you don't go and eat, a bunch of cake later, then that is helpful. So 1 to 3 servings is kind of the recommended amount. And again, that should be pretty easy to kind of do once you know what a serving kind of looks like. Can low estrogen be a barrier to fat loss? Yes, estrogen in general, when it is too low or too high, can be a problem. So it can be part of the issue. And so again, working to normalize those levels is very important. And again, you will do this with your clinician, and then there are ways that we can help your hormones and support your hormones through food as well. Let's see. How do you determine what your calorie deficit should be as a beginner? If you are unable to find someone to help you with that, there are calculators online that determine it based on your age, your weight, your height. And then usually you have your activity level also incorporated in that. And then from there, you decrease it by about 300 calories. So you figure out what those maintenance calories are, including your activity level, and you decrease it by about 300. This can sound daunting. This can sound hard. So if you do need help, please ask. And, that's something that I would do for you and help you figure out, well, what is your maintenance calories? What is a calorie deficit for you? And then how do we get there? I do encourage you guys to not jump into calories just alone, because most times I can start out patients with, just, hey, let's try intermittent fasting, or let's try eating a little bit better. And they don't have to track their calories as much. So just mentally keeping track of things can also be helpful without having to put it all in an app right off the bat. So don't jump to calories just yet, but just revisit what do your meals look like throughout the day and kind of have an idea. However, if you need help, that's something I would do to try to help. Let's see. How do you know what is too low of a calorie deficit? Oftentimes hunger is a good indicator. You have a good period of time where you're just really hungry, but then there is also the fatigue, the irritability. You're thinking about food all the time and you're just focused on food all the time. That's probably too low of a calorie deficit. If your energy level is actually decreasing, there's something off there. If you're not able to get through your workouts feeling great and yes, tired, but energized, that may be also a signal that you are eating too low of a calorie deficit. Oftentimes, just figuring out what those calories are can give you an idea compared to what you're eating. Oftentimes, we don't know how much we're eating. And so finding help is super helpful. I usually assess what you're eating after a 7-day diary, and I am able to tell you, hey, it sounds like you're eating a little too little. You're eating more than you need to. That is what I do. I assess that. Are men's calories requirements different than women's? Absolutely. Because when we figure out your calories, it takes into account your age, your height, your weight, and your activity level. And usually there is a male or female, because then the equation changes for male or female. So yes, depending on your body size and the fact that you're a male, you likely have more muscle mass. Therefore, your calories would be different, usually higher. Lucky you guys. Let's see, how do I know what my estrogen level should be if that is the cause of my fat gain? That's when you work with a clinician. That's what your clinicians are for. They're able to look at your blood work and tell you, hey, your DHEA is not where it should be. Hey, your estrogen level during this phase is not where it should be. And they would be able to tell you it's kind of out of place, it's too high, too low, whatever that may be. And that would be an indicator for you of, oh, this could be part of my problem of why I'm not seeing fat loss. So that's where your clinician, your PA or your doctor or nurse practitioner will help you figure that out. Let's see. So in terms of testing for hormones, like I said, I defer that to the clinicians, and they will be the ones according to your just generalized standard lab work that they do at first. They can go from there and go, we need this test or that test. It also depends on your age and so on. So your clinician, your doctor, PA, nurse practitioner will be able to determine that. Let's see. My cardiologist recommends drinking 2 glasses of red wine every night. Well, that may be heart healthy, but it's not going to be perhaps helpful toward your fat loss journey. And so it is a matter of considering, well, can we do something else for your heart health that it doesn't require 300 extra calories? Now, if that is a recommendation specifically from your cardiologist to you, and that's what you need to do, we can work it into the day if we need to. I personally would say that that would be a discussion with the cardiologist and say, hey, is there something else I could do other than drinking wine, because it's adding up to my calories? I mean, if you do 300 calories a night, 7 nights a week, you're packing on quite a few excess calories. And so that might play a role into how many excess or leftover calories you have for the day. Any other questions? I think I've got them all here. I did have a question on how do you get started with MaxWell. So if you guys go on the MaxWell website and you click on Be a Patient, they will give you all the information. We have great people that will call you, talk to you, and kind of let you know how to get involved. We have a number of clinicians, and I am registered dietitian, and my services come along with being a part of a MaxWell patient. So I hope that this was informative for everyone and helpful to anyone. If you are one of my patients and you have questions, please reach out. Also, feel free to bring them up during our next visit. If you are not a patient and would like to be and you're a MaxWell patient, please talk to your clinicians and say, hey, I would love to see the dietitian and discuss X, Y, or Z. And if you are not a patient, I would love to have you as a patient for sure. Let's see. I have one more question. How do you avoid binge eating later in the day if you're practicing intermittent fasting? I see this very often. And to avoid that, you have to eat good filling meals earlier in the day. So your lunch can be, if you're intermittent fasting and creating a calorie deficit through the fasting, your lunch can't be 200 calories and expect to not be hungry later. So during that fasting period of time, that window, you still need to eat the calories your body needs to function. So let's say Sally, she needs to get to those 1600 calories. And if she, let's say, only eats 400 at lunch, that means during snack and dinner, she has to eat a lot more calories. So I always say, look at how many calories you have that you need to be eating, and then divide that out for the number of meals that you eat. So let's say Sally eats 600 at lunch, 600 at dinner, and the rest at snack time, because that way she's getting all the calories in. She's getting all the recommended protein in. She's getting all the vegetables she should be eating as well. So to not binge later in the day, you got to be eating well-balanced, nutritious meals earlier in the day. And if you're gotten to a point where you're binge eating late at night and specifically on sweets and things like that, I would love to talk to you, because we need to kind of revisit what your meals are looking like. It may be that your meals are not balanced enough. You're not getting enough protein. You're not getting enough healthy fats. And that's why you're craving more things later down the line. All right. Well, you guys, it's been a pleasure talking to all of you. Thank you for all your questions and participating in all of this. I look forward to our next group visit. You guys have a good one.